Now the reaction and insights as the White House pushes for a nuke deal with Iran. The chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Royce. Welcome, sir. Great to have you again.
Good to be with you.
Have you been able to figure out why the administration is really trying to push for an Iranian nuclear deal timetable for March 31st, particularly at a time when we're hearing that France is expressing alarm that the West may be trying to undermine its own negotiating leverage by rushing to complete the deal, and France is raising red flags about giving in to the lifting of sanctions? What's your reaction to this?
Well, the zeal for the deal has been a problem from the beginning, and if you'll recall, in the last session of Congress, I and Congressman Elliot Engel had a bill that had passed 400 to 20 to put further sanctions on Iran and give the Ayatollah a choice between compromise on his nuclear program and economic collapse for his country. And the administration, although that bill had passed the House overwhelmingly, were able to hold that up in the Senate by convincing the Senate Democratic leader not to allow the bill to move. So from the beginning, we've been moving back from our positions. So the French are objecting at this point because, first, the sanctions would be lifted, and over a very short period of time, maybe a 10-year period, Iran would no longer be under any pressure. And the second problem for them, I think, is the problem we have in Congress with the IAEA, the inspectors, telling us they have 1,000 pages of documents that Iran was working to develop a nuclear warhead and put it on an ICBM missile. And we want access to that information. We want to be able to verify this agreement. So we've backed up on everything else. ICBMs. The Ayatollah has said we're going to have massive ICBMs developed by Iran, and it's not in this agreement. Enrichment, they're allowed to continue to enrich. But now this last point, if we're not even allowed to go in and get the evidence in terms of what they've developed on a nuclear weapon, then we really have capitulated in this negotiation.
Well, you know what's also really fueling critics who are very skeptical of any deal with Iran are the actions that are clearly divisive towards the U.S. Just one day after President Obama, for example, appealed to Iran to seize what he's calling, quote, a historic opportunity for a nuclear deal, and John Kerry saying substantial progress is being made, you have Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, calling for death to America. Here's how he phrased it, if we can put that up on the screen. A crowd in Tehran yesterday. Of course, yes, death to America, but America is the original source of this pressure. They insist on putting pressure on our dear people's economy, a reference to Iran's big push to lift sanctions immediately. You know, it seems unreal this is happening while the White House says everything's on track for a deal.
Well, the White House is very naive on these subjects. For example, the White House pulled out the defense system in Poland and the Czech Republic that was meant as an intercept system to protect the United States and Europe from a launch from Iran. They did that in order to curry favor with the Russians, to push the reset button, as Hillary Clinton said, as Secretary of State at the time, push that reset button with the Russians. All they did was to make us more vulnerable, in my opinion. So at this point, it takes on a very real national security meaning if we allow Iran, while it's messaging death to America, death to the great Satan and the little Satan, to go forward and not have the verification on the agreement, to have this thing lifted after 10 years, such a short time frame. This is the other thing that Hollande, the head of state in France, is saying we should not be capitulating on. So it's interesting that the president is spending more time putting pressure on Hollande. I have a letter signed by 367 members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, siding with the positions that France is taking, saying don't give up these points in the negotiation that we just circulated last week and have sent to the White House. This is essential for our national security, in my opinion.
Well, we've been pointing out that the trust factor is a big one, because how can anyone really trust Iran to honor any deal? It's gone back on its word many times, and you were pointing out about the IAEA. The UN inspectors up to this point, for example, have been prevented from taking a close look at some of the sites in the Iranian mines and suspect right now over the development of nuclear weapons there.
Can I give you an example of just how gullible the administration has been on this? So we're talking now about this subject of inspections. And in the middle of this negotiation some months ago, we caught Iran developing a new supersonic centrifuge that spins even faster so that their undetectable breakout capability would be ever quicker. And the decision, this is the way it was interpreted by the administration. Basically, well, the negotiator on the Iranian side did not know that this was going on, so he did not really understand that this was a violation of the current agreement we have with Iran. Obviously, his boss knew, right? The Ayatollah knew, because the Ayatollah is the supreme leader. That's their title, and it's not for nothing that he has that title. He has the ability to decide, and if he decides death to America, or if he decides to go forward with a nuclear program and we don't have verification on it, then we've got a big problem here in the United States. This is the message that the French are sending to the administration and that we as members of Congress are sending, and this is what has the Senate members concerned as well, who feel this should be a treaty, obviously, in which Congress has input rather than the United Nations making the decision of lifting sanctions, sanctions that were put there by Congress in the first place.
With all this evidence that you're pointing out and putting out on the table right here, where's the pushback going to really come from? Do you see it's going to come from the Congress, the Senate right now, to say, whoa, before any deal is signed, we need to see it first?
It's coming from the House of Representatives, Foreign Affairs Committee, and our leadership. It's coming from the Senate, but it's also coming from the Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister of France and the Head of State of France, who are all saying, enough. Let's get an agreement with something in it that guarantees the verification that we need here, and let's not have this thing elapse after 10 years and have Iran have undetectable breakout capability, where at that point they can arm all the ICBMs that the Supreme Leader has said he's going to put in place.
Well, obviously the stakes remain quite high, and very disturbing developments coming from the Supreme Leader in Iran. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.